Hello, everyone. We're just going to let everybody have a minute or two to get settled in before we get started. Some of you may not even be hearing this yet. Welcome, everybody. We're just going to wait a minute or two for everyone to get here and get settled in. All right, we're going to give everybody just one more minute. Come on in. All right, looks like we're pretty settled in. I'd like to thank you all for coming today and welcome you. My name is Denise Bernard. I'm a volunteer with the UC Master Gardeners of Santa Cruz and Monterey counties. And I hope you're going to be able to enjoy this fabulous program we have for you today on child-friendly gardens. Before we get started though, most of us have gotten pretty comfortable with Zoom, but just a few reminders for us. Please double check that your microphone is muted. And we also ask that you turn your video off, and it minimizes distractions and helps our presentation run more smoothly. For the best experience, you may find that the speaker view will give you the most bang for your buck, so to speak, as far as the presentation. If you have any technical questions, I'm happy to help you with them. You can go ahead and message me in the chat and I'll get you on track, or we'll figure out what's going on. We've enabled the live transcript feature down at the bottom of the page. You can click on the button there and it'll give you some sort of real-time closed captioning if you'd like to be able to see as well as hear what's going on. And then of course, anytime during the program, you can go ahead and submit questions in the chat, and then we'll just answer them at the end in our Q&A session. We'll keep track of them for you. You may have heard when you clicked in that the event is being recorded. So you don't have to worry if you miss just a moment of it. You'll receive a link to the recording within just a few days after this. So a little bit about the Master Gardeners. Some of you may be familiar and others may not. Our program has been around for about 40 years, more than 40 years now. We're all volunteers. We work in partnership with the Agriculture and Natural Resources Division at the University of California. We all receive comprehensive training, and our job is to provide outreach and research-based education on horticulture, pest management, and sustainable practices for home gardeners in our local communities. And we have kind of a new thing for us today. We want to thank all of those who were able to donate to us when you registered. But in case you didn't get a chance for the first time, we have an opportunity for you now. We've gone ahead and put in a link in the chat. If you're enjoying our class and feel like you'd like to donate to help us out a little bit, there's your opportunity. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to our speaker for today. Anne, go ahead.
Denise, can I bust in a minute?
Oh, absolutely.
This is Delise. I am also a Master Gardener, and I'm here supporting this program. I just want to say, we got a message, a direct message about our website being down and when will it be resolved? The Master Gardener website that we depend on to communicate information to you is currently under significant attack. Why on earth they chose Master Gardeners to attack, we do not know. But it's currently down. It's been down for a couple of days, and we don't have an ETA for that I know of that it's going to be repaired, but keep checking is what we recommend. Okay, check your local papers for upcoming classes, and I'll talk about classes and how to register for those soon at the end of this program. Okay, I'm done. Thanks.
It's all yours, Anne.
So,
Hi,
yeah.
I'm Ann Jensen. I've been married for 10 years. I have 2 kids, 4 and 7. I'm a former archaeologist with a master's in maritime archaeology. I grew potatoes for the first time on accident. It's a funny story, actually. I had heard that you could grow a potato, that you could grow a really beautiful bushy plant from just planting a potato. So I planted a potato and I grew this big, beautiful bushy plant, and it lived for about 3 or 4 months. And then for no reason at all, it just died, and I was sad. But then, I went to dig it up and plant something else there, and I found a bunch of tiny potatoes in the ground, or it was in a pot. I found a bunch of tiny potatoes in the dirt, and I was so surprised. I was a teenager. I was living with my mom at the time. I was so surprised, and I was like, "Are you playing a trick on me?" And she was like, "No, I'm not." And it turns out that's how you grow potatoes. You plant a potato and then you grow potatoes. And so it's just a really funny incident. And I'm also allergic to garlic. I love to cook, crochet, and garden, and I hate doing dishes. So I'm sure you can all think of many reasons why getting kids to play outside is a great idea. Here are a few of my favorites. Kids who get to play outside, building forts, digging in the dirt, making mud, become adults who want to protect nature. Mental health. There are many links between mental health and the outdoors. It builds a sense of wonder and curiosity, builds confidence, helps kids understand where food comes from. I refer you to my potato story in the last slide. And also, it gives kids a chance to explore and find foods on their own. And if they can do this on their own in a low pressure environment, they're much more likely to try new things. My son actually used to love blueberries, and one day he just stopped eating them altogether. For years, he wouldn't even try them, which was so frustrating and confusing. But after I started growing blueberries, and he could try them again on his own terms by finding them in the yard, he did, and now he loves them. Of course, now he'll only eat them straight from the plant, but at least he's eating them again. There are tons of reasons to get kids outside. And of course, one of them is that it's fun. So what is a kid-friendly garden? Most people would say the picture on the left. Grass seems to be what most people think of as kid-friendly. But what about the picture on the right? There's a lot of elements at play that kids really enjoy here, like stepping stones, a hammock. Believe it or not, there's a trampoline in this picture hidden behind some plants. There's lots of pretty flowers they're allowed to pick and that attract butterflies and hummingbirds that are fun to watch. There's also food plants throughout the picture on the right that they're allowed to pick from freely. Like an apple tree in the top right corner, there's grapevines along the back fence. There's salvia flowers that they love to pick and suck the juice out of. There's blueberry bushes, strawberry plants, and more. Would it surprise you to know that these 2 pictures are exactly the same spot, taken only 3 years apart? So here we have another one. These pictures were also taken exactly 3 years apart, about 3 years apart in exactly the same place, same spot. Ignore the sleeping child, he's clearly bored. The one on the left is grass and an old chicken coop. The one on the right has paths to explore. They can ride bikes and scooters on the paths. They can sit in the playhouse and eat cherry tomatoes and carrots and cucumbers and strawberries and blueberries that they find by themselves. The flowers attract butterflies, bees, and hummingbirds to watch. And they're allowed to pick as many flowers as they want to use in the mud kitchen, which I will soon talk about. So my point is that a kid-friendly garden can also be a beautiful garden. And a lot of that has to do with choosing the right plants and organizing your space. This picture is taken from just outside our back door. We have lots of pretty flowers right outside the door. And then the farm, which doesn't always look so nice, is on the left. It's where we grow most of the annual plants. The seating area is tucked close to the house on the right-hand side. And all throughout, there are paths that are fun to explore and food plants that bloom at different times of the year. This is a different view. Here you can see that we have a dining area, a relaxed seating area with an art easel that stays out most of the year. The mud kitchen is on the right, and tucked everywhere are plants that feed either us or the wildlife. Here again, you can see the path that the kids ride bikes on. I had it circle the perimeter of the yard so that they can do a loop. As the kids get bigger, it'll be too small for them, but for now, it's perfect size for them. So let's talk about plant selection. These are my top plant recommendations for a beautiful and bulletproof kid garden. This is the area right next to the trampoline. So it gets pummeled with balls flying off the trampoline multiple times a day. And I mean, look at them. They are basically fine. All of these plants are drought tolerant and they can get run into and hit with a ball regularly, and they're still beautiful. So let's go through the list. We have lavender. There's a lot of different types of lavender. But for the one that blooms all year in this region, and it blooms pretty much all year, is called Lavandula dentata. The flowers are great for bees, but we've also seen hummingbirds drinking the nectar from the flowers, and goldfinches land on them and eat the seeds if you delay deadheading a little bit. The next one on the list is yarrow. Yarrow comes in many different colors: pinks, reds, whites, yellows. It blooms spring and summer, and the flowers last for months. Each flower stalk lasts for months. And so it's really low maintenance. The yarrow also attracts a lot of butterflies. It is edible, but it doesn't taste very good. The ground cover that we're using in this photo is called Diamondia. It's great. We water it like twice a year at the kind of middle of summer and end of summer. So it really hardly needs any water. It actually tells you when it needs water because the underside of the leaves are silver and they curl up when they need water. And so it looks like the whole ground cover has turned white, and that tells you it needs watered. So it's a great drought tolerant ground cover that can get run on constantly. I mean, it kind of looks like a shag carpet in places that don't get walked on because it poofs up a bit more, but all the areas that get walked on, it just flattens out and looks great. Next, we've got alyssum. It's hard to see in this picture because it's small and it's mostly in the hammock area, but it is amazing. It only needs trimmed back once a year, but it blooms year round. So it's an excellent source of nectar for ladybugs and bees, especially in the winter when not much else is blooming. And then the last thing on the list is salvias. So on the next slide, I've got a bunch of pictures of a bunch of different salvias. And there are actually hundreds of different types of salvias, one to fit any space. I think there's actually over 400 different types of salvias. Some are evergreen, most are deciduous. Some like full sun, some like full shade, most are drought tolerant, some like more water. So you really can find one to fit in any space. They all bloom over and over again, and you can even find ones that bloom year round. It's really important to think about how big you want it to get. The Salvia apiana in the picture on the left is huge. They actually get like 6 foot tall and wide. The microphylla in the middle with the red picture, where the red flowers, is 6 foot wide, but it's only 2 feet tall. The picture on the right has some amistad in the back, which is 4 foot tall and wide, while the little row on the right-hand side is called Salvia Vibe, and they are fully grown at 1 foot tall. So I might recommend using the Salvia Finder at the Flowers by the Sea website to find the right salvias for your yard and for your space and your sun and water requirements. And that is linked at the end of the presentation. It's a really great finder because you can put in your growing zone, how much water you want it to have, what color flowers you want it to have. So really great feature. Soon I'm going to tell you about some projects that you can do to create fun spaces around your yard. But first, I want to make sure we're all on the same page with a couple of terms that I'm going to be using a lot. One is annual plants versus perennial plants. So annual plants are plants that grow for one season and then die. Annual plants need replanted every year. And some examples are like carrots, calendula, cornflower, lettuce, broccoli, potatoes. And then perennial plants are plants that grow for multiple years. They do not need replanted every year. And some examples of these would be like fruit trees, salvias, lavender, strawberries. Yes, strawberries is a perennial plant. You're supposed to keep them for about 4 years. Asparagus, tree kale, those are all examples of perennials you don't need to replant every year. So I recommend having a good mix of both annuals and perennials so that your yard looks good throughout the year, but also so you have variety. The first year we were in our house, I only planted annuals, and then that winter was the most depressing. Looking out the windows, everything was brown and dead. So having some evergreen perennials is also good. Fall and winter are the best times to plant perennials, in my opinion, because then they can get established with the winter rains that we have and the cooler temperatures. And they're not quite as stressed by the drought and the heat of the summer. Spring and summer is when you want to plant annuals, because then annuals need the heat and the warmth to get going. So my first project recommendation is going to be a playhouse. So I recommend building a playhouse out of bamboo poles and twine. How you do it is you will want to dig a shallow trench in the shape of the letter C, basically a circle with a clear opening. Then place bamboo poles in the trench and backfill it to hold them in place. If your ground is soft enough, you can push the poles into the soil. If your soil is really hard, like concrete, you can soak it before you dig, and that should make it easier. That means you have clay soil. If you have clay soil, it's often easier to dig in the spring when the soil is still kind of moist from winter rains. When you put the poles in the ground, you want to put them close enough together that kids can fit between them, cannot fit between them and trample the baby plants. So I recommend at least 9 poles per structure. If possible, put the opening on the north side so that the plants will then shade the interior of the playhouse. In the winter and spring, before it gets too hot, you can grow snap peas. They need twine to grab onto, so string some extra twine around your playhouse. Rows of it is good, so they can grab onto the rows. You can also do it vertically, as long as there's some twine on there for the little tendrils of the snap peas to grab onto. That's what you need. In the warmer months, like late spring and fall, you can grow pole beans. Pole beans, they don't need twine to climb, but they do need usually to be tied to the bamboo pole when they're about 1 foot tall, so that it helps them to find the pole. And then once they find it, they will wind their way up it all by themselves. This is actually a picture of pole beans. In addition to creating a cool structure, snap peas and pole beans are both great plants for kids to grow. I have yet to meet a kid that doesn't like snap peas. The flowers, leaves, and tendrils are all edible. Pole beans are great because they're fun to shell, and the plant itself is super low maintenance. If you leave the beans on the plant to dry and then harvest them when the pods are super dried out, they're not only easier to shell, but some of them actually pop open, which my kids discovered, which one time when I found them throwing the beans into a bucket, and they would pop open inside the bucket and all the beans would fly into it. And so it totally worked. They had a great time shelling beans, and then we cooked them and had tacos. In terms of size of poles for the playhouses, you can use 6-foot poles, but it's going to make a pretty small structure that only 1 or 2 kids can fit into. So I actually recommend using the 9-foot poles or larger, because you're going to lose some of that in the ground. And also then you can fit like 3 to 4 kids inside of one of these playhouses. And you can put the poles slightly farther apart as well. This picture is actually using 9-foot poles. But they're very narrow because the space that we had was small. But if you put them further apart, then it can make the interior space much larger. So your structure doesn't even have to have plants on it, growing on it to be fun. This one is actually in full shade. So it's really hard to grow things on, but I left it up because the kids still love playing with it, even though nothing's really growing on it. Sometimes we put blankets on it, usually not. And in the winter, we grow sugar snap peas on it when the tree above it loses its leaves because it's deciduous. And then the teepee's in full sun. Another project idea is you can build a tunnel. This bamboo tunnel is made using basically the same structure as the playhouse. You just need bamboo poles and twine. I'd recommend using the larger 9-foot poles so that you can walk through it as well. You can grow all the same things on a tunnel, as well as a few more, which don't work as well on the playhouse. For example, I grew a cherry tomato playhouse this year, only to realize that it was a bad idea because the inside of the playhouse doesn't get enough airflow, and the tomatoes got fungus much sooner than all the rest of my tomatoes. Climbing squash, like spaghetti squash, can also be grown vertically, but they're also more susceptible to fungus, so they would do better on a tunnel also, as well as tomatoes. Pole beans you can grow on a tunnel. Snap peas you can grow on a tunnel. Now, if you're using bamboo, then you want to grow annuals because the bamboo only lasts for about 2 years. However, if you want to grow perennials like thornless blackberries, you need to use a metal frame for your tunnel. I was growing thornless blackberries on this tunnel in the picture. And in the 3rd year, it started to collapse and I had to replace it with a metal frame. It was a huge pain. So in hindsight, I recommend just using the metal frame to begin with for any perennial tunnel. This is a picture of the metal frame that I replaced the bamboo with for the thornless blackberries. Playhouses and tunnels are great to have in your yard because they provide height, which adds visual interest. They shade themselves, which gives kids a great place to escape the hot summer sun, and they create an enclosed space that gives kids a sense of privacy. It can be hard to grow ground cover inside of these tunnels and playhouses, so we usually use wood mulch or pea gravel, and then we lay down a blanket whenever someone wants to hang out in that space. So you've probably heard of a fairy garden, or in our case, we made a Smurf garden. You can make or buy small items to place somewhere in the garden. Sometimes people put like a tiny door on a tree, and it looks like it's an entryway into a different world. We basically created an outdoor dollhouse with Smurfs and mushrooms as furniture. You know your kids best. If you have kids that like to play with dolls or action figures, they might be into creating an outdoor home for them or an outdoor home for something else. Smurfs are amazingly weatherproof and resilient. I can highly recommend them. My husband actually has had these Smurfs since he was a kid, so they've held up pretty well. Super shady areas, like under this big maple tree in this picture, are great for stepping stones and obstacle courses. And you can create them out of natural products. Ours is made completely out of different sized tree stumps. I actually built the mound in the center and placed a ground cover strawberry on it. And then I put bigger logs around the outside with smaller logs and stepping stones through the middle of the mound. All the logs that are upright, you're not seeing their full height because they're actually buried into the dirt a little ways in order to make them more stable so they don't fall over when stepped on. In addition to being used as stepping stones, the larger upright logs are often used as a table with 2 chairs, for all kinds of tea parties and lunches that we've had. Having lots of stepping stones around is a great way to entertain kids. It's amazing how much they like stepping stones. It really is. They're better than just paths. They're fun to walk on, and they help keep kids from walking on your plants. My kids are really into pretend play, so this area has been used as a landing site for pirates, a castle where the best Pokemon are found, a campsite, a stage for performing, and the location of many, many, many tea parties. The mud kitchen. Mud kitchen is where kids are in charge. This is a favorite spot in our garden for ages 2 to 12. Even the neighbor kids often come over, and this is where they want to play. It's a great place for all ages to play together, and they'll often spend hours in here. The little ones like to pour water between buckets and containers. As they get older, they like to try out digging and making mud. The 6 to 10-year-olds like to play a game where they all make something like on Top Chef, and then someone judges whose is the best. And then whoever wins gets to pick the next challenge. It's important not to have too many rules in the mud kitchen, otherwise it's not fun. At our house, we have one rule: what you make in the mud kitchen stays in the mud kitchen. And this happened after a day when we had 6 kids playing in the mud kitchen, and mud ended up all over the backyard, including all over the trampoline. So now we have that rule. The most important features of a mud kitchen are a work surface. This one I made out of crates that I just screwed together. You need a water bucket, not free access to water. I made that mistake also by giving them a hose one time and then water everywhere. So giving them a bucket that you fill up, kind of as needed or on request is a much better way of controlling the amount of water they're using. And then you can also at some point say, okay, that's enough water for today. A place to dig is a really important part. And I didn't realize how important it was. So a place to dig is a really important part of having a mud kitchen. A shelf that they can hold tools on is really great. Tools, really important. And also plants that they're allowed to use, and let them know which plants in your garden they're allowed to use. And then expect them to use those plants. And it has to be okay if they, pick all the flowers from the plant you said that they were allowed to pick flowers from, or pick all the leaves, from that plant. So I highly recommend actually having plants around the mud kitchen that they're allowed to use, particularly salvias. They're tough, they produce tons of flowers and they keep producing. And like I said before, kids like to suck the juice out of them. They attract hummingbirds, butterflies, and bees. So salvia is also my top recommendation for putting around the mud kitchen. When the kids are in the mud kitchen, like I said, sometimes they want to play with water, sometimes they want to make mud, and sometimes they just want to make creations. Another project idea is a tea garden. A tea garden is a garden with flowers and leaves that can be eaten raw or brewed into herbal tea. Kids can use scissors to harvest plants, which gives them practice with dexterity and hand strength. After harvesting, they can put their flowers in a cup, and then you can pour the hot water in the cup to make the tea. The flowers don't always taste that good. So I actually add like a frozen strawberry anytime they're doing just flowers, and it cools down the tea faster and also then makes it taste like strawberries. The leaves taste better, like mint and lemon verbena, those tend to taste a little bit better. So I always try to encourage putting some leaves in with their flowers, but sometimes all they want is the flowers. But let your kids experiment with the different flavors and have fun, and the different colors. They'll have fun making different combinations. And the flowers and leaves can all also be dried for use in the winter. That's what we've done with these jars, as those are all the ones that have been dried. Here are some of the plants that you can add to your tea garden. I'll go through, a list. So for leaves, plants that you would be eating the leaves of, we've got thyme, lemon verbena, lemon balm, stevia. There's also mint, oregano, rosemary. For flowers, you can eat the petals of cornflower, which is the bottom left, also called bachelor's button, viola and pansy, yarrow, calendula, borage, chamomile, hibiscus, rose, red clover, zinnia. There's tons of flowers that you can that are edible and you can use for tea. Here is a list of edible flowers that you can plant at different times of the year to have in order to have flowers year round. I noted that some of these are annuals and some are perennials. So if it needs planted every year or not. If we look at the winter list, we've got the top item is calendula, which can be grown year round, but it gets here in this area, it's really dry during the summers. And so it gets powdery mildew really easily. So I only grow it in the winter. I plant it in the late summer, fall. So actually I've just planted it last week, and it will start blooming in a few weeks, and then it'll keep blooming until early spring, as long as I keep cutting the flowers. If you let them go to seed, then they stop flowering. Viola and pansy are next, and they're examples of plants that can be also grown year round, but they do best in the cooler temperatures of the winter here, winter and spring. And in the hotter times of the year, they do well in slightly shady areas. They can be grown in full sun in winter because the sun's not as hot, but during the summer, they have to be in shade or part shade. I put alyssum on both lists because it does equally well in winter and summer. There's snap pea flowers, crimson clover, which is also a great cover crop, and of course, salvias. On the summer fall list, we've got a bunch of flowers that like full sun, just as much sun as you can give them really. And they can also tolerate heat. There's cornflower, yarrow, borage, alyssum again. And then I've got arugula and radish flowers listed. Another way to get edible flowers is actually let your cruciferous vegetables bolt when it starts getting warm. All of those flowers are edible, like arugula, radish, broccoli, and they taste slightly like the plant they come from. So like if your kids don't like arugula, I mean, what kid likes arugula? Have them try arugula flowers. They have a mild flavor. It tastes mildly like arugula, but it doesn't have the spicy bite that the arugula leaves have. And same goes for radishes. So it's kind of an interesting way of them to get to try the flavor without having to have the full effect of the plant. Lavender is also on the list. They are, I believe all the lavenders are edible, but only one of them actually tastes good. Most of them taste kind of soapy. The one that tastes good is called Lavandula augustifolia. And then of course, salvias. So everybody loves monarchs and they are beautiful. And growing milkweed is very controversial. So I'm not going to talk about monarchs. Instead, let's talk about black swallowtail caterpillars. This is a picture on the right of a black swallowtail caterpillar. I mean, they're gorgeous. Aren't they amazing? They're so colorful and they're even more beautiful in person. We get them in our yard every year. And here's a quick list of plants that the larva can feed on. But honestly, you can probably ignore everything else on the list and just plant the mammoth dill. Ever since we started growing mammoth dill, we have not once failed to get the black swallowtail caterpillars. Maybe it's because the mammoth dill grows 6 feet tall and they can't miss it. I don't know, but it always works. We also grow all of the other plants. So just try planting some of them and see what happens. This past summer, there were actually a couple of caterpillars on one particularly large mammoth dill. And then it got attacked by aphids, but I left it alone. And just a few days later, check out the next slide. It was host not just to aphids, but and swallowtail caterpillars, but also to mating ladybugs, ladybug larvae. And I didn't get a picture of it because it's so small, but parasitoid wasps, which are so microscopically tiny. But they lay their eggs inside the aphids, and then the eggs eat the inside of the aphid and they turn the aphid into a husk called a mummy. And then the little parasitoid wasps burst out of the back of the aphid, all alien style, when they're ready to be born. It's really incredible. And they're, so basically this one mammoth dill plant was host to all of these insects. So I obviously find insects fascinating, and maybe some of your kids would too. So it's worth having some plants in your yard for attracting things like caterpillars, and you might attract a bunch of other cool stuff too. A food forest. This is another project idea. A food forest is a space where kids can play, explore, and pick food as they discover it at different times of the year. A food forest can have perennial fruits and vegetables at 7 different layers, but you only actually need 3 layers for it to be considered a food forest. The first step is to plan your space, plant trees and then shrubs and then so on. Make sure you define your paths so that plants don't get trampled when they're small. And you can plant annual plants in between perennial plants while you're waiting for the perennial plants to grow in. So to give you an example of every layer of a food forest, I'll go through them all. So the canopy, this picture actually has a maple tree in it, which it's too cold here to actually get maple, or it's not cold enough here to get maple syrup from the maple tree. Otherwise, that would have been a great addition. For other really large trees, you can use nut trees. The sub canopy is more likely where you're going to start in the home garden. And the sub canopy has fruit trees like apple, pear, plum, citrus. And then you can go to the next layer would be shrubs. These are berry bushes. So blueberries, raspberries, red currants. The herbaceous layer is next, which is things like tree collards, asparagus, saffron. A ground cover layer, an edible ground cover is actually strawberries. The root crop layer, it's like carrots, potatoes, rutabaga, parsnips. And then climbers, which are things like passion fruit. We've got thornless blackberries, pole beans, snap peas. Those are all climbers that you can add to your food forest. So by growing things at these multiple different layers, you're maximizing your space, and you're maximizing the number of things that you can grow, which, you know, the more things you can grow, the better the space is for kids to be able to find something at different times of the year. So some things to keep in mind when you're planning your projects is to prepare your projects ahead of time.
Hey, folks, I am sorry, but somehow my screen is being commandeered. Is somebody sharing? Marianne Spradling? Whoever you are, please stop sharing. I'm going to try and bring it back. Okay, thank you.
So some things to keep in mind when you're getting your projects ready is to actually prep your projects ahead of time so that when your kids are ready to help you with a project, they don't get frustrated and you don't get frustrated. Plants die, it's okay. Even I kill plants all the time. Just keep trying. Some people are really good at growing one thing and terrible at growing another. You know, it just happens. For example, everyone says lettuce is so easy to grow from seed, but I'm terrible at it. I can never manage to grow lettuce. Carrots, everybody wants to grow carrots, but they are particularly fickle. Sometimes you get a package and none of them germinate. And then in the next package, they all germinate. They can take up to, I think it's like 20 days to germinate, which is a really long time. So just keep trying different things and adapting and figuring out, you know, what you're good at growing. Always plant more than you need. If they all do well, you can remove some plants. You're also going to lose some to birds and squirrels and gophers, and you know, and that's okay. So I always recommend planting more than you need, and try to encourage wildlife instead of getting mad at it. If the birds are eating all your strawberries, put up a bird feeder. They usually prefer that anyways. If squirrels are eating all your apples, try putting up some nuts for them to enjoy instead. Your kids will love seeing all the wildlife, and you can always buy strawberries at the grocery store. We have about 100 strawberry plants, and we still buy a pound of strawberries at the grocery store every week because that's everyone's favorite thing to eat from the garden. So they still get to pick some every few days, but we lose a fair amount, you know, to birds and snails and roly-polies, and that's okay. We need snails and roly-polies too. I try to relocate them to the compost pile if their numbers get out of hand, but they're decomposers and they're just doing their job. So pick plants that produce a lot. Salvias produce tons of small flowers, and kids love to pick them and suck the juice out of them. They can also eat the flowers, like I've said before. Cherry tomatoes produce tons of tiny tomatoes, as opposed to tomato plants that only produce really big tomatoes. Sugar snap peas produce lots of little flowers, lots of peas. The flowers and tendrils and leaves are all edible. And then, you know, also ask what they want to grow, or think about what their favorite fruit or vegetable is and try to grow that. And start with just one plant at a time while you're learning to grow new things, because plants are like toddlers. They each have different needs, and you have to decide how many you want at your party. Some words of warning before you get started. Plants die, it's okay. You know, plants have a lifespan. Everything dies eventually. If it dies before its time, hopefully it was a learning experience for you. I don't believe that anyone has a green or black thumb. I think that anyone can learn to take care of plants. And if you're worried, start small, start with just a couple plants. The best way to keep plants alive is to visit them and look at them as often as possible. Most plants will tell you if they need more sun or more water, or less sun or less water. You just have to, you know, watch them and pay attention, and you'll learn. You'll learn what they're trying to tell you. Be aware of toxic plants or plants that have toxic parts. So in the photo here, you can actually see my toddler picking cherry tomatoes, which are exactly the same size and shape as potato berries. Potato berries are the berries that grow on a potato plant. After it flowers, it grows potato berries. They don't always produce potato berries, but sometimes they do. And they look just like cherry tomatoes, except they're toxic. So, you know, be aware of toxic plants and, you know, the parts. Another one is sugar snap peas versus sweet peas. Snap peas are edible and have edible flowers. Sweet peas have toxic flowers that smell really nice. And the pea pods are toxic. But sweet peas and snap pea flowers are almost identical. And the pea pods are very similar looking. So if you're going to grow sweet peas, don't grow them near your snap peas, and make sure your kids know that they're not edible. Another one is rhubarb. You can eat the stalk of rhubarb, but the leaves are toxic. And also, you know, the green parts of potatoes, when you're growing potatoes, that if they get too much sun, they start to turn green, that part is toxic. So just know what plants in your yard are toxic and be aware that there are toxic parts of plants that are edible. Remind your kids to ask before they eat something, even if you think they know, even if they usually do ask. If it's been a while, they might forget to ask, especially if they're not at home. My 2-year-old was really good about asking before she ate something from outside. So I stopped reminding her. Then one day when she was 4, we were at a friend's house and she said, "The flowers here taste really good." And I was like, "Okay, don't panic. Can you show me the white flowers?" And so she took me to the white flowers, and, you know, of course, she was fine. She'd only had one. They were hydrangea flowers, which are mildly toxic. So luckily she was fine, but, you know, we had to have that talk again about how you always ask before you eat something from outside, especially if you're not at your own house. She had gotten into the habit of, you know, just being at home where all the plants are safe. So remind your kids to ask before they eat something. Okay, questions, comments?
All right, getting myself unmuted here so I can let you know what we've got, Anne. We actually only have one question so far. So if anyone else has questions, go ahead and put them into the chat and we'll get an answer for you here. And one is, it just ties exactly into what you were talking about. Are all salvia flowers edible?
I think so. I haven't found a salvia yet that's not edible. I would always, you know, internet search for that's the specific name of the salvia to make sure, but I don't know of any salvias that are not edible.
I saw that question and did a little research, and I think we need to get back to folks on that. Apparently they're not deadly, but there are some that are edible more so than others.
Okay.
So we can send that out when we send send the presentation and the resources that you're going to be providing. We can send an answer to that question.
Right. Any other questions? It was such a good presentation. We just get it.
Good.
All right. Okay. Let's see. How about concerns about spiders?
Not really.
Maybe other insects.
No, I mean, we tend to encourage insects really because it's interesting, and, you know, they belong here and they, you know, they live here just as much as we do. So we don't really have any concerns about spiders.
Are there any other insects that you discourage? I know there's some great ones, but maybe stinging types.
We don't actively discourage any insects. We grow a lot of things for insects, like, I mean, stinging types like bees and stuff. We grow a lot of bee attracting plants. We haven't really found that we have much of a problem. Both my kids, actually, I think just one has been stung by a bee, but you know, he was fine, and it was actually a dead bee that he picked up off the ground. And so we don't have any bee allergies here, which is great. I think if you have bee allergies, it's definitely something to be more concerned with, but we don't worry too much about any bugs. we mostly like watch them. We get out our loop or microscope and we go and we look at them. I think Elise has a question.
Can I make a comment about the spiders?
Yeah.
So if you're a teacher, you might be concerned about the two spiders in California are black widows and brown recluse.
Mm.
Both of them hide out in wood piles and dark, dry places. So keeping your yard clean, keeping kids out of dark, dank storage lockers, that sort of thing. That's one way to kind of keep them safe from those kind of spiders. They're very rare. It's a rare thing, but it is something that can happen and be dangerous. But garden spiders, the big ones, the yellow ones, they're just great for the environment.
All right. That is all I'm seeing in the chat here. So
I see one recommendation, and I'm wondering if anybody else on this call has ideas from their own gardens that they want to unmute and contribute. So somebody here, Mary Jo, has a comment that she always plants radishes with slow to germinate carrots, and so in a row you'll have the radishes popping up early, which keeps their attention.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I've never grown them together before, but I will try that.
That's something I've done.
Yeah.
So is anybody feeling bold and want to unmute and tell us about your kids' garden? And I'm just saying that because we have a little time here. Okay, it's a shy group. So I am going to tell you now, we would like your feedback. We always want to be continuously improving, and every class gets a feedback form. So Denise is going to put in the chat a link to a very short little review. We want to know also what you'd like us to teach. So we're looking for that sort of information from you. And within a couple of weeks or months, you might well receive email from the California State Master Gardener Program. They send an evaluation that asks you if you have actually implemented any of the information you learned in this class. And they do that because it shows impact of the program, and this is how they get funding. So it's really important that you answer that if you happen to get that in your inbox. So thank you for answering that when it comes. I want to tell you about things that are coming up. Unfortunately, since our website is down, as I mentioned, you can't see it, but hopefully it will be fixed and back up because we have an online plant sale that's happening October 11th to the 24th. And you'll be able to shop online, order your stuff, pay for your stuff, and then there's a contact-free pickup in Salinas for all the plants. It's going to specialize in some natives and perennials and a huge and beautiful array of healthy, wonderful plants grown by master gardeners. This is one of our primary fundraisers this year, and we really hope that you will populate your garden with our plants. And then coming soon in October, again, the website is down. So I'm going to, in the chat, put a couple of links that go to our ticketing system, which is not feeling sad and lonely. This works. So this is how you can actually register for 2 classes. October 12th, we're going to have a wonderful 2-person panel teaching about Central Coast native plants. And this is a really excellent class if you're interested in natives. It's an overview. It talks about native plant communities and is very specific to the Monterey and Santa Cruz areas. And then on October 26th, we're going to teach straw bale gardening. So if you don't have your own real estate to dig and invest in, if you have a small space, if you don't feel like digging in the dirt, there's lots of reasons you can get a garden going very quickly with a bale of straw. So we will have a class on that. And we have some resources for you. The image did not show up. So Anne, go ahead. Speak to your image, your resources. We tried.
So the top link, there's the salvia finder. Top link there for looking for salvias for your space.
Why don't we open that and just do a little something here. Zone 9. And I wanted to have average water. And then I want to see the plants. And I just wanted to see if it was going to tell us about the flowers and if they're edible or not.
Ah,
Let's open Golden Girl. And exposure, soil type, pot size, mature. Wow, sure gives you great information.
Mhm.
Notify me when it's in stock. You can even buy them here. Dealing with deer from the blog, ratings and reviews. It doesn't look like a simple thing to look up on the Salvia Finder. So we will get back to you on that question. Anything else you'd like to dive into or tell us about?
I don't know. I planted some more salvias today. Could you tell I like salvias? I only mentioned them like, no, 5 times.
So I assume everybody on this call is familiar with Life Lab. This is a science, garden-based science curriculum that originated in Santa Cruz at the university, UCSC. And it's taught in a lot of the grade schools in this area. So there are resources for families that you can make use of. They have programs and they have collateral, guides and information that you can use at home. So this is a fun thing to explore too. And I think that that's it. If nobody else has any questions.
I do have a funny thing that actually just happened today with the kids in the garden. If anybody is interested in growing daikon radishes, they're the really big white radishes. And they look surprisingly like the mandrake root from the Harry Potter movies. So my kids were playing Harry Potter in the backyard, and my son went and made my 7-year-old went and got the headphones and put them on the 4-year-old. So she had her headphones on, and then he pulled one of the daikon radishes out of the ground and then started screaming like it was a mandrake root from the movie. And he thought that was hilarious.
I want to be one of your kids when I grow younger.
I told him he could do it. Too. I was like, go pull that one. That one looks, because they were gonna play, I don't know, plant class anyways. And so I was like, oh, you should do the mandrake root thing. I've got a plant that looks like mandrake root.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Anne, for that wonderful presentation. And enjoy your kids in the garden. Everybody take care. We'll talk to you later. Thank you. Bye.